welcome everybody. First time in the hot seat, so hopefully I don't mess up too many things. So we'll start off with roll call, please.
Mr. Kern is absent. Mr. Rainier?
Yes, present.
Mrs. Young? Here. Mrs. Psalm? Here. Mr. Sharp?
Here. Pledge of allegiance. I recognize a familiar face out in the audience. I'll pick the boy to do it.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First primary item, approve the agenda as presented. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
So moved. Is there a second? Seconds. Roll call.
Mrs. Psalm? Yes. Mrs. Young? Yes. Mr. Rainier?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes. Consent agenda to, number one, accept minutes from the previous meeting. 2, approve substitute teacher list number 6 as presented by the Fairfield County Educational Service Center, which is attachment 2 in our program here. Approve donations, $300 for the Nate Psalm family to pay lunch charges at the K2 building. $515 was donated from each of the following to pay for the accumulated lunch charges through November 2019. Brad Hutchinson, Lloyd Helber, MPW Power Wash, and Gorsuch Enterprises. And then $10 from Tanya Spence for the sophomore class. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? I'm sorry. Yep, go ahead. Mr. Rainier moves. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Some seconds. Discussion? I would
Just want to recognize those people and say thank you.
I was gonna say, I know we think we've mentioned a different meeting, definitely thank you to those who made those donations, it was very, very kind. Roll call.
Mr. Rainier?
Yes.
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes. Public participation. Okay. We'll do the student liaison reports first. Mrs. Scott.
Do you want to start with the liaison or?
Yeah, we'll start with the
Sorry.
liaisons.
You guys go.
Aaron Crawford.
You're all students, give them that.
All right. So I guess the first thing that we have here, the drama club had its first actual rehearsal today, starting working on the play. The play itself, the dates for that, performance dates, are March 27th and 28th, Friday and Saturday. The start time is probably going to be 7 or 8 p.m., probably 7 is my guess, but I haven't actually been given that information just yet. That would still be in the hands of Ms. Williams and Ms. Harris if you actually have any questions about that. Academic Challenge has been meeting for some time, having practices. Meets are going to come up probably in the next 3 weeks, do you think? 3, 4 weeks, 2 weeks? As well, very soon. We have just got the schedule for that, and we're hosting the tournament here at Amanda-Clearcreek. So if any of you are free on the tournament date, which slips my mind at the moment, and you would love to ask questions concerning all manner of trivia to your lovely students here at the high school, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I'll take the clock. So
You take the clock? Okay.
we're holding you to it now.
I can do that. You've committed to that. You've committed to that. So I'll tell Mr. Heidel that you're down for clock. Okay. What was the
Aaron,
date?
can you email us the date of your tournament so we can tell you whether or not we can be a reader?
Is there on the calendar? Wonderful. See, Miss Myers on the ball here.
I will look.
March 11th. So just a few weeks before.
We'll still email you.
Oh, geez. Did I miss something?
Sorry, small phone.
It's okay. Awesome. Thank you. The next thing that we have, I guess this is something that already happened. All County Band happened last week. It was on Wednesday. We had the most people of any school there. 21 was the final count, right, Ms. Meyer?
I think it was 22 actually. The kids have to audition in the high school group. They're not, the middle school nominates. We had 10 students in the middle school and we had 22 out of 35 that auditioned make it into the county band from schools all over the county.
Yeah, out of like 75, 76 total.
Yes,
So
there was
almost a
75.
third of that was us. So that was really impressive, great concert. The director who worked with us was really exceptional, so all good things to say about that. Science Club, blood drive and COSI trip, 2 things coming out pretty soon. The COSI trip's just for juniors and seniors, kind of like the one that happened for sophomores and freshmen earlier in the year. It's going to be the 23rd, it's just going to happen throughout the day. And then the blood drive, the one that could concern you if you wish to donate blood, be the 31st, I believe is the date for that. And just anytime during the day that we're ready to take blood, if you want to come in and donate to the cause, we're welcome to have you. Other than that, I'm just going to turn it over to Kyle here.
Aaron, is that blood drive January 31st?
January 31st,
Okay,
yes.
we'll put in the e-newsletter to let people know. I just want to touch the girls and boys basketball are doing quite well this season. In addition to that, we will be having pep band tomorrow night here at the school. So if you want to come out and listen to the band and catch up with the basketball game, you can. The student council, I touched last meeting that we did a clothing drive. We are donating those clothes this week, and we have to have multiple cars because there is a lot of clothes. I want to touch on the incentive trip that I talked about last meeting as well. That is going to be January 24th at Tiki Lanes. And just a reminder that the students going on that trip aren't just students that are on honor roll. They are also students that are quote unquote on a roll. Mr. Hinton's pun intended. That means that they improved from their first 9 weeks GPA to second 9 weeks GPA by at least 0.5 points. Finally, Saturday, January 18th, we are going to be hosting the Jeff Arndt Invitational, which is a wrestling invitational. I was just informed there's going to be 16 teams here, so that's going to be quite a large event if you want to come out and show some support. And lastly, I just want to say I hope you guys all had a good holiday season, and yeah. Thank you.
All right, now.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwood. Good evening, my name is Julian Scott, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Amanda-Clearcreek FFA chapter. As chapter president, I feel honored to have the opportunity to speak in front of each of you at the monthly board meeting and know that the things that are done within our school would not be possible without your support, as well as our superintendent. Since the last board meeting, our chapter has held one ag breakfast, began participating for the district ag sales contest, sent qualified members from the Columbus Zoo Light Strip, held one meeting in the Ag Center, and sent members to compete at the state novice parliamentary procedure contest. I would like to recognize Josie Speakman, Autumn Perry, Hannah Somm, Morgan Cowdery, Emily Buckley, Ian McKnight, Alex Williams, and Riley McKeska for placing 5th in the state. This is only the second time that we've ever had a team compete in the novice parley pro contest from our school, so I was really impressed to see that they placed 5th in the state. I will now proceed to upcoming events. In the next month, we will hold one monthly meeting, one ag breakfast, and send members to compete in the following contests: the State Ag Communications Online Quiz, the District 7 Ag Communications Contest, State Ag Issues Online Exam, Ag Power Diagnostics Online Exam, and the County Public Speaking Contest. Additionally, our agricultural issues team will begin completing forums in the community and area for their contest. As I conclude tonight, I would like to thank our administration, our superintendent, and our school board for all that they do for our chapter. We genuinely appreciate everything. Do you have any questions?
The other person I have down for public participation is Kirk Hines.
Thank you very much. So members of the board, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I'm Kirk Hines. I'm certainly a graduate here of Amanda-Clearcreek. I have 3 kids that either graduated or currently at Amanda-Clearcreek and obviously live in the district. So I just want to come before you and talk about gym usage. And you know, what I want to say is, you know, about 2 weeks ago we were at a basketball game, and afterwards we had about 8 parents around talking about the ability to practice and the ability to do gym usage. And what entered my mind as we all sat there and to be honest complained about the situation was, had that been brought before the board, is it something that had been discussed? And that made me realize that that's something that I needed to do. So it is my first time to be before you all. So again, thank you for that. And that's really what I wanted to do, is I just want to come and share that and see where that got. And I really want to give you just a few specifics just in a few minutes, over a few minutes. So really, and what I'm asking about is, you know, for this basketball team, and I think there's many, but no usage of the gym over Christmas break. No Sunday usage of the gym. Specifically, as I looked back and looked through the schedules from December 16th through January 6th, our 6th grade team had 4 games. In that period, we had 0 practices. You know, so I think there's other groups here that utilized the gym. They were probably a little more creative than our basketball team. So I think some of them used it over that period that should have been probably a dead period or whatever we call that. But they called them open practices. So rather than having a structured practice like we did, they called them open practices or open mats. I think others, and I compliment for them, they went outside the district and actually paid for gym usage. So that was a good thing, but as you think about that, paying for gym usage when we had gyms sitting here was a concern, and that's what these parents sat around and talked about, and then when I decided that I wanted to come before you all. At those 4 games that we had without practice over that period, you know, I made it a point, and the other parents, of asking each one of those schools, do you practice over this period? And the response I got was, what are you talking about? We play games. What do you mean, do we practice? Of course we practice. And that was really the response. So the question was, and the answer was, yes, they do. So this is my child, he's in 6th grade, and I want to come before you and say that, you know, whatever policies and whatever changes that there were any will have no impact on Caden. And I'm okay with that, and that's another reason I wanted to be here, because it's certainly about the kids after him. And what I'm saying is Caden has 2 more weeks of basketball, and then this policy will really be meaningless to him because we'll be in 7th grade, and I think there'll be practices, and maybe I'm mistaken about the usage of the gym over Christmas break, so I should qualify that, and you all would know that better than I would. But as he traveled until this year, it's the first year he's played at Amanda, you know, at Tays Valley, I can tell you we had game after game on Sundays. I could use their gym, I could use their workout room while I was there on Sundays. In the 18 games that he has this year with Amanda, we'll have 2 games here at home. So we'll have 16 away. We have 2 games here at home, and the reason that is, again, most of the games are on Sunday, and there's a lot of games over break. So 2 of the 18 games will be played here at Amanda. I coached at Fairfield Christian for 6 years with my daughters, who have now graduated from Amanda-Clearcreek, and again, I want to say they had a great experience here. But in that 6 years at Fairfield Christian, we had games and practices on Sunday afternoons at Fairfield Christian. So really, you know, I just want to share all with you. I want to ask, how can we assist in evaluating the policy that I need to understand better, and making a change. And then you really just respectfully request a response, and whether that's today or at a later time, I really would appreciate a response of how we can affect that change. So with that, again, I think there's some other parents here tonight that came just to show support. We didn't want to bring a 20 or 30 here. We could certainly do that. I know that would be easy. There's 8 on the team that would have all shown up here tonight. But I just wanted to come and share that with you. I want to, again, thank you for what you do. I know it's a countless job at times, and so I just really do appreciate what you all do. And with that, I'll just end by saying if there's any questions, I'd be glad to try to address those or answer them the best that I could.
Do you want me to? We have started the process.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of the policy. We have taken Mr. Kern's policy, and I will tell you, we have not met. We do have a work session that we're going to discuss about planning tonight. We will discuss the policy at some point tonight.
Okay.
As far as a change taking place, I'm not sure it will take place tonight. In the 2 weeks, I'm not sure it's going to take place in 2 weeks. But it is certainly something that we have discussed over the years. But we will look at this policy and what comes out of that. I think there's going to be some things that need to happen, and we'll make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. So if there's any way I can help, I'd certainly be glad to do that. But thank you all very much.
I didn't get here early enough, we were in practice. Ryan Riddle, I'll try my advocate this time with the board meeting. So Ryan Riddle, 97 graduates, live in the district, a couple kids that go here. Just to echo what Mr. Hines said, can you guys explain to us real quick, for us that have zero etiquette on the board, exactly what the policy process is? So you say you're meeting, but what are the steps that are taking place so that we can either expedite this or get community involved to get some more recommendations? I know that it's on here, but to me that means nothing. This is a piece of paper. I don't really care. I need to know, as a community member, I need to know exactly what the process is. And we all do.
Okay, the board basically has 3 responsibilities. That's to create policy, hire me, and hire Mrs. Bradford. Through that process, the creation of a policy just does not happen overnight. There are several things that must take place in regards to.
That's what I'm asking, JB. You're not answering the question. That's what I'm asking. What is the process? It's on the paper.
The process is.
Answer the question.
I'm going to. The process is that we will meet and discuss what processes go through in regards to the contract that we have with custodians, that as part of this, the contract that says the policies that state what has to take place in order to have people in the building, and whether the board chooses to change that policy. It's a matter of, it's things that I'm not sure all board members are aware of, that we must sit down and talk about to make sure that they understand why we're about to do something or why we do something in the past. So that, obviously because it does in the past does not mean it's right. But I mentioned their responsibilities, and my responsibility is to enforce the policy. So you have to look at all the things that go into changing, so how it affects, like I say, the contracts, those type of things. So,
Right, that's for the current policy, but the policy that Mr. Kearns presented at the last board meeting, what's the process of implementing that into whether or not it's replaced?
In fairness, sir, this is my first board meeting, and they did read the policy once before I was sworn in, but they had the foresight to wait until I had a chance to familiarize myself with the policy and the circumstances surrounding it, including the physical security of the building, the contracts with the custodians, and it wouldn't be fair to come and vote on it on my first meeting. So,
I think you're misunderstanding. I'm not asking you to vote right now.
right,
Okay, what I'm asking, that didn't Mr. Kern present a potential solution of a new policy?
yes,
he had.
Okay, so we have an old policy and we have a new policy. Okay, what's the process of replacing the old policy with the new policy?
we will meet, and during that work session, we'll decide what goes, what stays, what comes in.
Okay, is that voted on
It would be voted upon, the policy would be voted upon, yes.
by the board members?
Yes,
Okay, that's all, that's.
yes.
that-
And you'll hear tonight, we have some policies to approve that we've had a first reading on and a second reading on.
And that's where I'm going with this,
Yes.
because we're not seeing that first, second reading here, so we're just seeing it as basically a discussion.
Yes.
So where I'm getting at, do we need to do anything? Do we need to meet with you in order to get that so that we have that first discussion, second discussion, whether or not we're gonna change the policy?
No,
Okay,
it's on the agenda to be taken care of
okay.
at meetings and work sessions.
So our fate is in the hands of the board.
Yes, you're
Okay.
correct.
Perfect. Sorry, that didn't mean that, I just,
No, that's
that, I wasn't.
why we have
I
those
understand the old, I
discussions.
was going new, but thank you very much for clarifying.
You're fine.
All right, there's no other people listed.
Yes, there is.
I didn't
Okay.
get to it yet. I said
Okay.
listed on the public participation, so the only other item listed here is JB.
All right, as Mr. Hines mentioned, the thankless job that you have as a board member, and I've often said there's only one person who's probably more foolish than the superintendent to take this job is maybe a board member. For the compensation that you receive and the accolades you get, I do appreciate what you do, and you have taken on a major role here in regards to what you do for our community, our students, our staff, and I'm most appreciative of what you do and the opportunity to work with you, and I'm humbled that I get the opportunity to work with you in the way that we do, and to make changes in our students' lives that I know we're making each and every day with our staff. So with that, when I call your name, I'd like to have you up here, and we would like to take a picture. It won't get posted on the webpage, but I do want to make sure that we recognize you for what you do and all that you do. So I gotta tell you up front, I apologize to Mr. Renier for misspelling his name. However, his name is spelled correctly in the agenda, it's spelled correctly on the certificate, so I do appreciate it, I apologize. Mr. Renier?
It's my first meeting, so I really don't feel right.
Well, Mrs. Song?
Thank you.
Mr. Sharp? Mr. Sharp? Mrs. Young? Thank you. Now, if you wouldn't mind staying here so we can, Mr. Penn will take a picture.
All right, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Good deal. I got one moving.
Can we give them a round of applause for what they did?
All right, so I just got a comment, just because it's kind kind of funny when you mentioned compensation, and Justin says, "We get compensated?" And I was like, "Well, kind of." For those who don't know, it's $480 for the entire year. Compensation is, so it's before taxes, exactly. So after taxes, it's more like 300 and something. So we do get compensated. But it's, I wouldn't go out and buy a boat or anything.
No. 2 days, it's photo versus
All right, moving on to the next item, treasurer's report.
Okay, in your packets, you received the treasurer's report for December of 19. In the packet is our treasurer's financial summary, our 5-year board report, fund sum, fin sum, our checks report, and our bank reconciliation. One thing that I did do a little different, I changed up the bank reconciliation, if you noticed that, because I know that it was important to see the CDs also, and when they matured and how much. So I made sure that those were in there. So let me know if you like that, if you want to see any change with that, but I wanted to make sure that I changed it up a little bit. How I saw that. Thank you. You're welcome. So our financial summary for December. Our revenues, our general fund revenues were $907,960. Our revenue sources included our state foundation settlements, investment earnings. We had student tuition coming in and student fees. We did also have a refund of prior year expenses. It was $1,000 this month. These were 2 checks from last fiscal year that still hadn't been cashed, so we voided those out. And then we deposited, remember last month we talked about the ICS with the new program with Kingston Bank. So we deposited $6 million from our checking account over to the new ICS with Kingston, remains same bank. We did that on December 9th. And for the 22 days that we had in there, our interest was over $5,000 with this new investment account, so I'm happy about that one. Expenditures of December general fund expenditures were $1,310,769. Our total checks, which is not just general fund, but it's our federal funds and any other funds that we have, for December, $1,747,094. Our expenditures in the capital outlay category include, most of it's all of our technology purchases. Expenditures in our purchase services are the lowest this month than they have been in the prior 3 years. The December board, in December, the board had approved a transfer of CD interest to our 03 permanent improvement. That transfer was done. And expenditures in the other category. Those include like our ESC contracts, deductions, any auditor or treasurer fees that we have from receiving any property tax or income tax monies, and audit expenses are in there. So I just wanted to kind of tell you what kind of goes into those other expenditures. So overall, our December expenditures were higher than revenues by $402,809 due to the way that our revenues are received. The current general fund balance is $9,313,382. We do have encumbrances of $1,405,831, which brings the available balance down to $7,907,551. For any of you who are not familiar with encumbrances, that means we've already got purchase orders saying that we need to spend it because we've got contracts or something for that. So we've already, basically like you're in an agreement for your mortgage and you've got your mortgage encumbered and you're paying on that we have to put purchase orders in place. So it means we've already allotted that money for a certain thing. So we can't respend it, okay? Does anyone, for one for sure, but I know Mrs. Young, you've seen these reports before, but I just kind of want to go through the reports to show you what's next. So after the treasurer's financial summary, you'll see a 5-year board report. And what we do is we just kind of look at that, like December over year, going through. So you can see all of the revenues, all of the expenditures, kind of where they come through. And I laid it out so you're familiar with it with the 5-year forecast. And then if we spent more than what we brought in is under your excess revenues and expenditures. I always have the ending cash balances showing our encumbrances there and then what we have available cash balance. And then I do the full year, fiscal year on the bottom 4 lines there. So I always show you what we started out with at the beginning of July and where we're at as of today. What we've spent so far in fiscal year expenditures, what we've brought in this fiscal year, so you can see the big picture. And then the graph to be able to show you how we're looking with our revenues, our expenditures, and our ending cash balance. So that's the board 5-year report. Our fund sum report is just what we've got appropriated, and our fin sum, we pull it out by every single fund, so you can see, it'll tell you what it started out with at the beginning, what our month today receipts are, expenditures, but it also has the fiscal year. It's a lot of detail, and you'll see a lot of that in your board 5-year report. Okay, so that's the fin sum. The checks, these are all the checks that we've written for the month, and some of them are memo checks, some of them are just regular checks that go out. Payroll's included, insurance, anything that we write a check for, it's in this checks report. And then the last page is your bank reconciliation. So you can see all of our investments, what checking is looking at, if we have anything in transit. This is actually our working paper in our office, and you can see then the CD investments also. Okay? If there's ever a time that you have a question on the financials or you want to see something a little different, just let me know, and we can discuss that and try to figure out what we can do. Okay? Thank you.
Ms. Bradford? Is there a motion to approve financial reports? Ms. Young moves. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Psalm seconds. Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mr. Rainier?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Thank you.
Superintendent reports and recommendations.
All right, I would like to recommend we approve the 2019-2020 certificated contracts for Title I tutor Faith Arney and Title I tutor Elena Smith and home instructor tutor Tolly Bebelt.
Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Mrs. Psalm, second. Second. Mr. Rainier, discussion?
All right, the Title I dollars, Mrs. Bradford, you want to explain a little bit where those dollars, where they came to be?
Those are federal dollars that we get in our Title I. So one of the things that we did at the beginning of the, well, I think it was in October, when we got all those funds, was kind of stated some of the things, programs we were going to implement, and we had talked about tutors. So this does not come out of the general fund, it comes straight out of all of our federal funds, our federal title fund.
Any questions?
Any other discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mr. Rainier?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
All right, I would like to recommend we approve the following supplemental contracts for the 2019-2020 school year, which the board has offered the position of high school reserve wrestling coach, middle school wrestling coach, high school boys track coach, high school girls varsity softball coach, and high school varsity baseball coach to those employees of the district who have a license and no such employee qualified for these positions accepted them. Further, the positions were advertised as available to any individual with license who is qualified to fill them and is not employed by the board. That being said, I'd like to recommend middle school wrestling coach Ashley Spires, high school reserve wrestling coach Robert Pratt, high school girls varsity softball coach Ben Hedrick, high school boys track coach Vanessa Butterball, and high school boys varsity baseball coach Travis Stone.
Is there a motion? Ms. Young moves. Second.
I'll second.
Ms. Psalm seconds. Discussion?
I believe we have some assistant positions, and we still have the varsity girls track coach to hire. Those positions we filled.
Roll call?
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mr. Rainier?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
All right, I would like to recommend we approve a change to the contract for LPDC for the 2019-2020 school year. Melissa Bennett was hired as an elementary representative for the LPDC committee for the school year, And then when the committee convened for the first time this year, Melissa was voted to be the secretary, which is paid at a different group. And she would be at step one because this is her first year as a LPDC secretary. Same amount of money, but different group. Just go ahead.
What does LPDC stand for?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Local Professional Development Committee.
Is
They-
that a committee within our school?
Yes, it's made up of teachers and administrators. Several years ago, Ohio decided to allow many of the things we do at our local level to be counted as hours towards recertification. Schooling was getting so expensive, many of our teachers do much of the work themselves, do it in-house, and they were getting no credit for it. So the Ohio legislature made a law, local LPDCs were created to allow this to take place. And it's been in place, I know it was in place before we came to the new building, so it's probably been 20 years that the LPDC has existed as it does. And it is paid by a supplemental contract.
I'll move.
Mrs. Psalm moves, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Young? Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Renier?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
I would like to recommend we approve volunteers for 2019-2020 school year for classroom Diane Miller and Valerie Valentine, and wrestling Matt Marshall.
Is there a motion? Mrs. Young?
I'll second.
Mr. Renier seconds. Discussion?
I don't think we ever go through the meeting we don't approve a volunteer. And I think that's, I mean, I sincerely, I think it's amazing that we have this many people who continually are willing to step forward and help us do the things we do, and I appreciate that very much.
And Justin even thought he was volunteering to be on the school board. So, any other discussion with that? Roll call.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Renier?
Yes.
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
I'd like to recommend that we recognize indoor track and the team sport for OHSA's purposes, though they're not funded through AC Athletics for the 2019-2020 school year.
Is there a motion?
Yes.
Mrs. Psalm, second.
Second.
Mrs. Young? Discussion?
We can, this doesn't cost us anything because it's mostly done by volunteer and mostly by students themselves. But they cannot enter a lot of these indoor track meets unless we recognize them as a sport that this board recognizes as a sport. So, I don't know how many we have involved in indoor track, but, yeah, demonstrating,
It's growing.
I know that.
That's what Vanessa told me,
I mean,
it's
you know,
growing.
students talk about it.
All right, any other discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Renier?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
I'd like to recommend we approve early graduation for a student who has met the requirements for early graduation.
Motion? Mrs. Psalm, second. Mr. Renier, discussion?
Good for her. Congratulations.
Can we stay in?
That's all.
That's
I'm
okay.
not-
All right, roll call.
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mr. Renier?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Mr. Kern was the legislative liaison report. Have you heard anything from legislators, or did you hear anything this week, past
Yeah, I did
weekend?
this weekend at the OSBA conference. They were talking a lot about the item that's on the agenda later,
Ed Choice?
ed choice. They are vehemently against it, and I understand why. But as far as the legislature, the Cup Patterson is still chugging along, but they're not sure what it's gonna do.
Do they feel that Cut Patterson has the strength that it did at one time, or not?
They didn't really address the strength, they were just saying that, the householder is, watching it because obviously it affected his district.
Mhm.
His wife is a teacher, didn't realize that. They're hopeful that
Yes.
something will be done with it. I don't know.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Building and ground report. You wanna do it, or want me to give? You got it.
You know,
Yeah, I'll let you start.
All right, well, there was discussion this evening about the 77 gymnasium. and the wall issue. I guess there's, after meeting with the engineers, there's two possible repair fixes. One of them is a little more of a traditional fix, but it might be a little bit unsightly, so there's questions about that. The other one is a newer kind of, it's a fabric, is that right?
Micro fabric.
Microfabric, which sounds to me pretty, I've never heard of it before, and we, decided we might not want to be the guinea pig for that. So there'll be further discussion once we get final estimates. But we're moving closer to a permanent solution. The access points, Mrs. Shaw, is that correct?
Mhm.
Came and spoke, and they are looking at potentially, or asking for an additional $50,000 to upgrade those. To my, well, what she explained was that the current system is from 2002, which in terms of technology is ancient, to say the least. So there's some some concerns there, and also the time frame they were looking at to potentially upgrade this is after the end of this fiscal year, so it would be after July 1st, right?
Can you define what an access point is?
You want to take that
It's,
one?
it's what's in our ceilings, allow us to have internet quicker.
Okay.
Internet access.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The internet
Not a
access,
physical.
not a door.
No.
Although that is up next, but
Okay.
yes.
I have a question. When we, several years ago, started doing the online testing, we added a bunch of access points.
And that was discussed tonight, and it's the age of them that's starting to,
The ones we added were only.
probably not those, right?
And that's hardware, but this is software.
Yes.
So the access points, I imagine that were added were like the physical hardware,
Which is
but
right there.
the software that they're using.
On those,
On
those are
those,
still the old ones, I
yeah.
assumed it was.
And we'll
upgraded.
probably
Okay.
add a couple places, we'll add a couple so that we.
Yeah, and I should add that it's on a license, it's a 5-year license, and our license expires in September. So the idea is that we do this upgrade, and we would probably get a discount on the license. And also, she mentioned that with the upgrade, there's an energy rating that we would get, and it would amount to an additional, or not an additional, a $20,000 kind of tax rebate, if you will. The actual total cost is like $70,000, but it comes down to $50,000 because of the E-rating. So,
When the license expires, does that mean our support is gone?
yes,
Okay.
so we'll have to do something,
Okay.
Regardless,
yeah.
with the
Right.
licensure piece.
Okay.
The keypad update, now the keypads are for the physical entrance of the buildings. And Mrs. Shaw mentioned that we have a quote, I think it's $9,200 from state security to update those and kind of bring those to a more user-friendly state where they currently, and JB, you could probably speak to this a lot better than I could.
Well, Mr. Renier mentioned the part about 2002 software on the access points. This is 2002 software as well. So obviously, we are starting to see some things age out. The server piece is what we're looking at changing. Estate security, that's a new company we've started using for our outside access pads. Our hope is that we can find something that can be integrated with our FMX system, which is a scheduling system. Currently, when someone wants to schedule something, Mrs. Pontius goes in and schedules it on our calendar, then she has to go back into a separate program and schedule the doors to be unlocked at a certain time. With this, we're trying to hope that FMX has a one-stop shop piece that allows us that when we enter it, custodians get notified, doors get set to open, all those things we just can't do it now with our software. They told us we
And
can't.
it would allow us to know if a door is left
Yes.
open and things. And this is something that, in looking at the policy to be able to allow folks access, things like this are an integral piece to look at, to make sure that can be done properly and still maintain the security of the building. She did mention too that by going, if we choose to go with state security, the nice thing is that they can already use the existing lines and hardware and even the badges that all the staff and administration has will still be usable. They won't have to redo all of that. It's just the server.
The state software has been the one that did our cameras to this point, the new ones.
The individual badges, that's what we give our coaches and that
Yes.
type of thing as well. How much are those a piece? They're not
No,
very expensive, are
they're
they?
right, a couple bucks,
Okay,
so.
but they're individually tied to that person.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So when they scan it, we
But-
know,
So when they leave and are no
we
longer
know
part of the
Mr. Dick
district,
scanned in when you
Yes.
use your badge versus if Joe used hers. Okay.
it's always an interesting conversation when they say, we noticed you checked in, and they said, no, I didn't, I wasn't here, and somebody else has the badge. So, I didn't mention this to Mr. Renier, we talked about it, because I forgot about it. The Attorney General, put out some safety dollars for us to utilize. I think our share is like $6,000, Mrs. Bradford, is that correct? We want to be able to use that. We have to define what safety feature we're doing. We consider this to be a huge safety feature, so we're gonna try to utilize the Attorney General dollars to pay for this entry piece software.
What timeframe are you looking?
Well, they were here today, so they said it would take 6 weeks at the most to get things changed.
So before this
Yes,
school year?
yes, should be, yes.
The next item that we discussed was the scoreboard, and the upgrade involved with that. One of the big pieces was getting sponsors. We were looking at possibly getting, I think you said, is it 5 sponsors? Mr.
4 or 5
4 or
sponsors,
5 sponsors at $10,000 apiece.
or whatever that number comes to be.
This is the football scoreboard?
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yes.
Football?
And the significant cost in this is looking to be the installation of the scoreboard, which will run about $30,000, give or take. And the one thing that was very encouraging though is that with being able to use the scoreboard, it's a video, so it's customizable and you can change it. A lot of times they say it can be paid for within 5 years, 5 or 6 years, just through revenue from advertising. So, or not advertising, I should.
Sponsorship.
Sponsorship, thank you. Yeah, so it's definitely one of those things that would probably in the long term, pay for itself. And ultimately, the one that's out there, I know myself and my father-in-law worked on it last summer because it had all kinds of electrical issues, and a number of other people have worked on it. And Mr. Dick, do you know how old it is?
It's one I know it's been here,
It's an
that I can remember.
item.
It's vintage.
It's old.
Yeah, I'm sure it's vintage.
What about, in addition to that, we had talked about the baseball?
Yes, that's gonna be a whole separate thing.
Oh, so it's,
Yes.
it's not like.
And what about the,
No,
did you talk about the basketball scoreboard? Because this year it's not working with it used to work where it had the player's number and,
I do believe it works.
Oh.
I don't think there's a volunteer to do it.
It takes a second it's virtually impossible for the guy to keep the clock and keep it. I will tell you.
well, I can understand that.
There are
That's a busy job.
some coaches who prefer not to use it because of, we have individuals who become so consumed with how many points they score and those other things, so.
So there's nothing wrong with it?
Yeah, that's what I know of. But,
Okay, gotcha. I've been to so many basketball games and we were talking about scoreboard. I was thinking, oh, we're gonna talk about why the
Yeah.
scoreboard isn't working. Got it.
So that's thank you for that. To clarify, it is the football scoreboard. Are there any other questions about that or anything that?
And just because I was in the school board meeting, one thing that was discussed on that meeting was also to further give ourselves an opportunity for sponsorship dollars of possibly, if you go to Liberty Union and some of those schools, they have that sponsorship of TVs or screens in the gymnasium to be able to do that. So that's part of something we spoke to Daktronics about as well, with those possibilities in the gym of being able to get more advertisement for more seasons, or more sponsorship for more seasons to help pay for those.
Thank you, sir. Then the final thing, well, the band room and the wall, not the wall, band room and its size, which has become an issue just due to the number of students we have participating in the band. Corey, did you want to say anything about the size of the band now? You said that at its largest here a couple years ago, you had 74 students.
74 kids in the marching band with flag corps. The room maximum occupancy sign list is 40. But again, when the building was built 19 years ago, sorry, because that's when I started here and it was under construction, there were roughly 25 kids in the band. And because there was the rotating revolving door of band directors, you don't build anything. I stuck around, so the kids. We've actually been over that 40 probably since the third year of being in this building, both in the middle school and in the high school level. The 7th and 8th grade band is usually over that 40 as well. It's very difficult to move when the instruments and the chairs are out, especially the high school group. We have 52 in the concert band, because fire and vocational kids do not do they only do marching band. If something bad were to happen and they would need to make a quick exit, it would be very difficult and kids would probably get hurt. To move from the front of the room to the back of the room, the easiest way is to actually go out the front door, down the hall, and through my office to get to the back because of all the equipment and stuff we have out. It's a great problem to have, don't get me wrong. So,
Thank you very much. Thank you. So a couple of the proposed solutions that have been looked at, and the engineer has stated, well, we could take away the wall that separates the band room and the choir room and make it one large room, but then we would have some scheduling conflicts because there are some times where both rooms are needed at the same time. Another option is to build an entirely new room somewhere, and Mr. Dick, I'm not sure exactly if that's been identified where.
They would go north of the building.
Okay.
North, towards the baseball field.
And then the third option is to just expand the current band room. And the thought there is that we're just adding 3 walls and tearing one down so that it might be a little less expensive to just expand that room. But one thing we wanted to make sure of was that we would have a little bit of wiggle room to grow. If we've had 76 students at one point, we don't want to build a room that will house 80 because 5 to 10 years from now, we might be revisiting this all over again, saying we're at the limits of what the room can safely use. And so the thinking is we want to plan for some growth, a modest amount of growth, and make sure that it could maybe hold roughly 100 students. And the big thing there is it is a safety issue that if the fire marshal or somebody that really paid attention to that kind of thing decided for some reason to come in and take a look, it could be something that we could get dinged on. So.
And obviously with the amount of students come, the amount of instruments, uniforms, those type of things that we need for storage, so.
When you say add a couple more walls, you're talking moving the building outside or taking up space inside?
Yeah, take it outside.
Outside, so towards the parking lot and
Yes,
the,
outward, it would go all straight towards the baseball field.
gotcha, okay.
And basically take the existing band room and make it a storage room,
Oh,
instrument storage,
gotcha.
uniform storage, what have you, because again, when you built the building for 40, you built for 40 uniforms, 40 instruments, 40 hats, whatever.
Right.
So it's now 2.5 times bigger than we originally planned on it, so.
The hope is that now, the hope is that we'll grow.
Yes.
So. And the final thing that came out of the meeting was that the K2 building lights in the parking lot are currently out. There were 3 600 amp fuses, correct? Mr.
I guess
Nicker,
what they
that
said
had been
before, yes.
blown. They're not exactly sure why, but someone will be here tomorrow to look at it. Mrs. Young had proposed possibly if when they look at it, they determine it's not gonna be a quick fix, it might be worthwhile to investigate some lights that are just temporary that can be brought in, because it's getting dark out early and there's a lot of different activities going on, and it could definitely be a safety issue, especially with young kids out in the parking lot. So that's something that, depending on the outcome of what they find tomorrow, we might need to look at.
should go. Any questions for Mr. Nair or myself? All right, building principal reports, Mrs. Marshall.
All right. Well, speaking on the Title I tutor, the primary is super excited for her to come in tomorrow. We have been spending the last week really looking at the data of our students and grouping them so that we can make sure that we get as many kids in as possible, and as many kids as we could to get some intervention activities as well. So we have all that set up and ready to go for Faith tomorrow. Our math and science night is coming up. This is always a really big event. This is going to be for pre-K through 8th. This is in February on the 27th from 6 to 7:30 here at the cafetorium. And we are super excited that we sent home our letters for the AC Savers Club today. This is brand new. Jill and I have been working with Kingston National Bank and the students pre-K through 2. So we're kind of trialing it at the primary this year. The kids can set up savings accounts, and Kingston National Bank is going to come in and bring bankers once a month. And the kids can bring a penny, whatever money, there's no minimum, and they will deposit that money with the bank, and they can continue to do it during the summer. So we're really hoping that we get a lot of applications that come in by Friday, and then start it rolling. And then January 10th, so this past Friday, we honored our students of the quarter and all of our kindergarten students who we considered chickaboom, so they knew all their letters and sounds. So we've been busy getting back in the swing of things with the primary and getting the kids geared to being back and not being sleepy, and not needing a snack every half hour like they're used to at home.
Mrs. Marshall, you
Yes.
said math and science night's the 27th,
Of February.
and it's in this,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yep, and it's pre-K 8.
With the AC Savers Club, do you know, like, if any of the students or their parents already have a savings account there at Kingston, can that account be used, or do they have to create a new one?
I actually just got that question like 15 minutes ago from one of the teachers, so I will find that out, because my guess is that they will let the kids bring in money, and it will probably just go into their other account, but I will check with Debbie tomorrow and get a final answer, because I'm guessing that you won't be the only parent, since I have a message a couple minutes ago as well, so I will figure that out and get something out to everybody.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Mrs. Cochran? Go
All
ahead.
right, at the middle school, last Friday, grade cards were released and they went home with students. This Thursday, we'll honor those students who earn honor roll with donuts and certificates in the morning in the cafetorium. The incentive trip is planned for the end of this month, or I should say is in the process of being planned. We're waiting for our honor roll to get finalized, and that will hopefully be to COSI, so I gotta make some phone calls and get that finalized with numbers. On the 29th, Rose French, one of the volunteers, is going to come in and work with some of our students for a life skills lab. I know the students really enjoy that. Our middle school girls basketball tournament starts February the 1st, along with wrestling, and then middle school boys basketball tournament will start the following Saturday on February the 8th. So they're kind of winding down their seasons at this point. Pennies for Patients, I was just informed today that this is our 10th year doing Pennies for Patients, and that will start on February the 3rd and run through the 14th. So we're in the process. I'm actually meeting with our guidance counselor and a couple teachers who co-advise our student council to kind of finalize plans for Pennies for Patients.
Thank you. Mrs. Wills?
Good evening. At the elementary, we have our third graders. They got to go right before Christmas break. They got to go to the Ohio Theater on their field trip, so we thank you for approving that. They got to see the Nutcracker, and they really enjoyed it. It was a really cool experience for them. We had successful holiday parties in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. We also recently just celebrated and recognized those students for our second 9 weeks honor of awards based on students that have most improved, students who are doing top AR, which is their accelerated reading points. And then we are holding our Principal's lunch this Friday, so I will provide lunch for those students and we will eat together. We had I thought, a successful PD coming back from school for the teachers on the 2nd and 3rd. We had received positive feedback on this event. My session was focused in the afternoon on FERPA. IDEA and active intruder scenarios. So we did some table talk stuff and gave them some scenarios on what would be a FERPA violation and how to support students with disabilities and what's the difference between an accommodation and a modification. And this conversation was done for all staff, so it wasn't just educators, it was our classified and certified employees that came through the rotations. Our third grade ELA fall scores, they come out on January 21st. So those would be mailed home to families, so we are excited for those letters to be released to us so that we can inform our parents of how their students scored.
Thank you. Mr. Henn?
I don't know how much of you follow the graduation seals. I had the opportunity to go sit with the other county administrators last Friday to go over that with representatives from ODE and Will Kirby from the ESC, Fairfield County ESC. Just to give you a heads up, there are, in the new graduation requirements, students need to earn 2 of 12 seals. 9 are state seals and 3 are locally defined seals. So we will be coming in the next few board meetings with some recommendations of our fine arts. 3 we can control and create are the fine arts seal, the student engagement seal, and the community involvement seal. So we will be bringing those before you so we can adopt our own local seals. The January Aces Way night is going to be a Thursday this month due to scheduling, but January 30th from 4 to 5 we're going to have a CCP informational night. Here, OCU, Hocking, and Columbus State and OUL, I believe, are going to be here that night to offer information. And then from 5:30 to 6:30 that same night, we're going to have an ACT prep informational meeting that night. And then lastly, this Friday, the second year of our welders, they go up to do their first practice on the machines on the welders they will test with at Columbus State. So I think we have 15 or 16 of them going up Friday to do their first testing or first practices, and they go up to test January 31st to become the certified welder. So we're getting to that time again.
Thank you. Questions? All right, new business.
All right, new business, establish a date and time for the records retention committee to meet. Is there a motion? We can discuss a date and time.
I'll move that we establish a date and time, yes. I'll second.
Ms. Dion seconds. All right. I guess we can establish a date and time.
So the records retention committee is the board president and the superintendent and the treasurer. So we can do it really anytime. Doesn't have to be, it's not even a full committee really. So we just have to review all of the records, our retention policy, and what records we can get rid of.
Could we do that during the school day?
We can.
Oh, it's just you 3.
Yeah,
So
it's
you
a-
really need to pick your date.
Pick the day, we'll vote on it.
Yeah, we'll do that.
We'll sit with bated breath as we discuss some dates.
I guess we could pick a day.
Whatever works for you guys.
I can't do this week.
That's fine. Most any day, at least for the coming month, between 9 a.m. and noon, I could do.
Mr. Dick, would you be willing to do it when we do the, after the agenda review?
Yeah.
Since we'll already be here?
It's fine.
Okay.
So that would be the 31st.
Yes, end of January.
9 o'clock, 31st.
9 a.m.
Fine, you?
Is 9 o'clock for the agenda prep or for the retention?
Very good question. We need to involve the other part of the agenda prep. What works best for you on the agenda prep?
It doesn't matter to me.
So let's do the agenda prep at 8. Do you want to do 9's fine, me.
No, 8's
9 o'clock.
I have to bring the kids to school anyway, 8 o'clock.
Hey, I've been married before. I know what that look means. So the prep is 9 o'clock. for the agenda, and then we'll go into the records, okay?
Are you sure? 'Cause
Yeah, that's fine. There's nothing on my agenda that prevents that, so that's fine.
So the records retention committee is going to be at
10.
10.
So that is the 31st,
Yes.
correct?
Oh, yeah. Putting it in my phone, so Any other discussion with that? Roll call.
Mrs. Psalm? Yes. Mrs. Young? Mr. Renier?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes. All right, adopt the tax budget for fiscal year 2021, attachment 3, which is what we were discussing
Yes.
before the meeting. Is there a motion?
A motion.
Moves, second?
Second.
Ms. Young, seconds. Discussion.
We had the hearing before.
We had the hearing and already discussed the case. All right, roll call.
Mr. Renier?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes. I'm still finishing putting my records retention with alerts, so I don't forget. All right. Approve amended appropriations for fiscal year 2020, attachment 4. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
So moves, second.
I'll second.
Mr. Renier, seconds.
So on the amended appropriations, there are several accounts, several funds that we did that in. The O22 tournament fund, because the football team went to tournaments, we actually brought in more and had more expenditures than we had anticipated at the beginning of the year. So we went ahead and changed that up along with the estimated resources. And the BWC project, we are using part of our refund from BWC for the remainder of the project. So that was appropriated also. We have figured that one out this year. The 018 Principals Fund, along with the 200 class funds, some of the programs that they are doing are changing up a bit, so we needed to change up their appropriations also to match those programs. And in our activities fund, we have some classes that have already graduated, so like one of them was 2010, and we don't ever budget anything for them, but if they want to go ahead, and we're trying to clean those up to get those to 0, so that class have decided to make donations, so we need to go ahead and do the appropriation so they can make that donation. In our Hostler, we received additional money for our Hostler fund, which is our science and math science areas. We received the second check, so you'll see those appropriations, so we can spend that. And in general fund, we needed to up bus parts, tires, and supplies in our general fund for this year. Other than that, that's all of our updated appropriations. I know it was a lot, we got some works, but revenues in, so we want to make sure that we could spend those. Okay.
Questions, discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mr. Renier?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes. Approve agreement for deposit of public funds with Kingston National Bank, attachment 5. It's a 3-year agreement through December 31st, 2022 to do banking with Kingston National Bank and participate in the Ohio Pooled Collateral System per ORC. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Moves, second.
Second.
Young, seconds.
So this agreement just says that we are allowed to deposit our funds with Kingston National Bank, and that's the bank that we are picking to continue with our checking. This is a 3-year agreement. We do have to kind of look at banks every so often, every couple of years, years, so we have a 3-year agreement, so in 3 years, we'll be looking again at those. We did check with a couple other banks because we also have CDs in with Fifth Third and a mutual fund in there, so we like to keep it local and keep the money being able to help our local taxpayers, just keep it local.
So with ORC, we have to declare the bank we're going to,
We do, we have
and
to,
that's why we're doing
Yes.
this, correct?
yes.
Okay.
And they are part of the Ohio Pool Collateral System, which is part of ORC also that we have to participate in.
And that's different from, I think it was called IPC that we talked about last time?
ICS, yes, it is different.
Okay,
The ICS is a sweep account.
right, so
Yes.
what's the Ohio Pooled Collateral System?
The state has set up a system where, we have to be able to log in and give them our bank information, and it has to be able to, and our bank also has to be able to put, amounts in there. And it has to be able to show out that we have our money pulled with other places, and it has to be legal and legit, and the state has to be able to see it. So every so often, I'll get an email that says, I need for you to verify these funds, and we just have to verify with the state that that is correct.
Is that the state treasurer, is it the state?
It's through the state treasurer's department.
So we can't put our money in Bitcoin.
No Bitcoin for us.
Bitcoin, yeah. They still exist. All right, anything else regarding that? Roll call.
Mrs. Psalm,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Renier,
Yes.
Mr. Sharp.
Yes. Approve policies, IKE, promotion and retention of students, JEDA, for truancy, EEAA, eligible zones for pupil transportation. These were, what readings is
This is, we've had the first 2 readings,
It's
so.
a 25th reading.
Yeah, see, we've had so many policy readings over the last.
These two policies, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's actually the 4th reading of one of them because
Well,
we made changes.
There was, yes, yeah.
All right, is there a motion?
Oh, yes. I so
Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Young seconds. Any additional discussion needed on these policy items? All the corrections and everything have been made
Yes.
to the umpteenth time?
Yes.
All right, roll call.
Mrs. Psalm,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Renier,
Yes.
Mr. Sharp.
Yes. Item 6, approve resolution opposing the Ohio Ed Choice Scholarship or Voucher Program, which is attachment 6. Should I read this?
If you would like.
All right. The resolution says, the Board of Education, of Amanda-Clearcreek Local School District, County of Fairfield, Ohio, met in a regular board meeting 7 o'clock on the 13th day of January 2020 in the board meeting room 1100, East Main Street, Ohio. The following members present will be listed. So-and-so moved, so-and-so seconded. To approve the following resolution with the number, resolution opposing the State of Ohio Ed Choice Scholarship Voucher Program, whereas the Ohio Legislature has recently made amendments which greatly increase the number and availability of vouchers for students to attend private parochial schools at public tax expense. And whereas such vouchers will be available to numerous families and students who have never attended Amanda-Clearcreek or any other public schools and for whom state funding has never been provided to Amanda-Clearcreek or any other public schools. And whereas Amanda-Clearcreek state funding will be unjustly decreased by the amount of the vouchers provided to such families and students who have not and will not attend public schools and others who transfer to private parochial schools. And whereas the estimated loss of revenue to Amanda-Clearcreek schools over the next 4 years is $190,125, which would devastate the district's finances. And whereas private and parochial schools accepting students with public tax vouchers would not be required to accept all students, but would be permitted to retain their selective admission policies without enforcement of other laws applicable to public schools. And whereas private parochial school students are not subject to the testing standards required of public school students, so that the actual performance of private parochial schools subsidized with public tax dollars will not be known relative to equivalent public school evaluation standards. And whereas this board believes that the Ed Choice Voucher Program as it currently exists presents serious constitutional issues regarding the separation of church and state and the funding of religious institutions with public tax dollars, and whereas the state of Ohio has a constitutional responsibility to secure a thorough and efficient system of common schools, and whereas the Ed Choice Voucher Program will have exactly the opposite effect by providing funding to private parochial schools at the expense and to the detriment of public schools and their students. Now therefore be it resolved by this Amanda-Clearcreek Local School District Board of Education, that this board reaffirms its commitment to free, accessible public schools which are adequately and equitably funded to guarantee a comparable education for all children, and therefore opposes the and respectfully requests the repeal of the ill-conceived Ed Choice Voucher Program in the state of Ohio. Be it further resolved that this board opposes any funding programs, vouchers, or otherwise that have the effect of diverting public tax dollars from public schools to private parochial schools. Be it therefore resolved that the treasurer is hereby authorized and directed to forward copies of this resolution to all Ohio State legislators, the superintendent of public instruction, and governor of the state of Ohio. Is there a motion?
I say move.
Ms. Song moves, Ms. Young second. Discussion.
Is the main issue here that money's not gonna go to us, or is it because we're not being treated fairly in terms of how we're evaluated?
Yes. I think
All of the above?
there is a piece of that we're held to a standard because of we quote unquote get tax-paying dollars.
Right.
However, those same tax-paying dollars that's gonna go to a private parochial school has no testing responsibilities. And then furthermore, the money that is deducted from our foundation is significant. I mean, of a district of our size, $190,000 and all that, people say it's no big deal. For a lot of school districts, it's not a big deal. But, you know, what's it gonna be 3 years from now? I mean, when other students start enrolling.
And it's a, and you can correct me if I misspoke, but according to the conference, when the legislative liaison was talking about it, for example, we might get $2,000 per student. This is just from foundation, but you have to give $6,000 for this foundation, for this student that even though they may have never stepped foot in this building.
Because our home school
So,
or something along those lines.
Yeah, or they go to parochial schools.
So it's not even
or
one for
private
one in terms of dollars
No,
that are forfeited?
the $6,000 is a random amount, basically?
That is the state dollar per student.
Yes, but we don't get that for our students.
Correct.
We're the public. And now, according to one of the people, because one of the women stood up and said her district is gonna lose $6 million. It's obviously a larger district. But she said that, and once you lose it, once that money goes, you don't ever get it back. So even if the student decided to come here, that voucher money is still gone.
So, if a student, so when you count your butts and seats, so they don't count for us because they're in a private school or parochial school, correct?
Correct,
So we receive no state funding for them at all.
correct. But we will have to pay it out for them.
It's an open enrollment student, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, when a
I was
student.
just always wondering, it's basically the same funding as an open enrolled student, but they're allowed to do that because our test scores several years ago were not where the state wanted them to
I think it
be.
was 13, 15, and 17, I think is the years they used.
So any student who was in our school district those years,
And even now, it weren't. Because I'm telling you, you have your parochial schools
so
with a
any,
flyer on their table when the parents pick up their kid up in the afternoon, saying, here's this, here's this.
so any student in our district, no matter what year they're in, can do this?
Yes.
For how long?
Forever.
Till they graduate.
Yeah.
That's
But I
all.
mean, how long is our school district, when do we test again, that they look at those scores and use them?
I'm not sure that's ever the option out. I don't think it's an out.
It's not like it's not reevaluated on any kind of basis.
We're in that choice.
And there was, and the vast majority of the school districts now have this, I don't wanna call it a failing rate. It's something that designated them as,
As an ed choice?
yes.
Ed
So it started out, let's say 50%, now it's like up to 75, 80%.
I know for ours, like one of the metrics was that you had to have a minimum number of students to meet the criteria. There was like 12 students and we didn't even meet that threshold, but we still were given a grade anyway.
We did not have enough for a subgroup.
And it was like, we never should have been graded on it in the first place.
Yeah, that was what they said that, first of all, the grading was flawed.
Shocking.
And-
So what is the process? So is the legislator looking at these, or we're writing this to get them to reevaluate it?
They're looking at it. I mean, there is a groundswell of people who are pushing this, and, our associations, OSBA, OASBO, I think is,
Yes.
BASA.
And all
Yes,
of them
yes,
are
there-
against it.
So,
It was put into, the change was put into the budget bill that was passed in July, at the last minute. And they had like 4,000 pages, nobody really realized what was in this bill.
I think it's probably had the, largest amount of support from all three of those groups of anything I've probably seen in quite some time. They realize it's not good for us, for
It's
most
free
of our schools.
tuition, basically, for anybody who wants to go to private school.
That's correct.
Yes, got
It's
it, and
tuition.
taking it right from,
Foundation payment.
Okay.
they were passionate.
All right, any other discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Rainier?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes. Approved contract with New Horizons for mental health services for the period of January 13, 2022 through June 13, 2020. Attachment number 7. Is there a motion? So moves. Second? I'll second. Throw me in there. Discussion on this?
This will replace, Mrs. Davis, who resigned in November, for the remainder of the school year, to meet our needs for our students who need these health services. Money, it's the same money that we would have paid in the contract with Mrs. Davis, so.
And then we'll look to rehire that
Yes, we
position
will
from the college.
reevaluate how we want to do it with the association and what we need for our students.
Gotcha.
And they are in the process of finding someone, so.
It's required too, right, this position is
It's not required, but with our students' needs that we have now, we need somebody.
maybe not required but necessary.
Yes.
Got it.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Mr. Rainier?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
All right, item 8, approve contract with Ogden Learning Center to provide services for a special needs student at $5,500 per month, not to exceed $55,500 per year, plus speech services. Is there a motion? So moves, second. Ms. Young seconds. Discussion.
Sometimes we have students that we just cannot serve here, and we must find those services for those students. And this is a case where Hogland provides us the best education for this student to meet their needs.
Can I ask what grade they're in, Mr. Dick? Are they young?
I don't know if it's fifth or, it's middle school age, somewhere in that, I think it's 6.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mrs. Young? Mr. Rainier?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes. Item 9, discussion items. First reading for BDDC attachment 8, which is agenda preparation and dissemination. There's really just one change to that policy. 4th paragraph highlighted there. The agenda together with supporting materials will be, instead of saying specifically mailed, it says provided, because some people would like to get it electronically instead of having it mailed, and this is basically opens that up as an option.
Yes. We have certain board members who want no part of any type of hard copy. And I'm okay, and I just want to make sure that it would be, once we make a decision, It doesn't mean you couldn't tell me, say, I need a hard copy this month, or I need it all electronic, or whatever. But this provides us the out of, we talked about going to electronic at the tables. And Mrs. Bradford and I discussed the fact that we can't write or type fast enough to do it on electronically. So it opens up, leaves the option of us providing hard copies as well as electronic copies. So this, again, it makes the practice match the language. The other, you want to talk about that other?
That's fine. Second reading, there's a list of them there.
And Mr. Renier, do you have those from, on number 9, letter B through H?
The tobacco use?
Yes.
And that,
Second reading.
I was here for the first reading, and I have read through this,
Okay.
and I feel confident.
I want to make sure that you have it. So,
thank you, I appreciate that.
so then our voting would take place on our February meeting. So if you have any questions between now and then about them, yes, ma'am.
On D for student suspension, when it's going through the policy.
Yes.
It talks about suspension, but it doesn't specifically have between in school or out of school. Do we need that definitely defined?
It's ironic you bring it up because we've had an incident since then that we have to address that part of some of the language with out of school versus in school suspensions. And you know what, I will bring that back to you because I forgot that. And I will, we probably won't vote on that one next month, but I will get the language changed. Part of it has in school versus out of school suspension in regards to, are they allowed on school property during in school suspensions for extracurriculars? I'm sorry, Mrs. Sloan.
I was just gonna ask you, when we put policies in for an additional reading, can you let us know what board minutes they were in?
Yes,
You know what I mean, just like a little note so I can find it. Sorry.
that's fine.
Do we still need to pick a version on the tobacco use one? Did we do
I
that?
thought we picked that one version,
We picked the one that matches the one that,
which is the
We
second.
currently-
yes, that what our current policy is.
Right, which is version 2.
Yes.
Okay,
I believe that was the November.
is that what it was? Okay.
Then KGC also had the two versions.
So basically on the minutes, if you're looking at the second reading, we would have had it the month prior to. So you can usually look in the back here and find some discussion on that for you. In the minutes, sorry.
But the actual policies would have been in the December packet. Month prior.
Yeah.
So they would have been in the November packet is where they were actually in, or did they
No,
were
they
in
were-
No, you're right.
Yeah.
The first reading would have been,
Mm,
no,
It was
been
last-
December, second reading is this month, so it's the month prior.
Yeah,
okay.
so,
But like this suspension one that Mrs. Young brings up, it will be brought back as a third reading because, or it's not, we haven't fixed the part that needs fixed.
yeah, all those ones listed under second reading were in the December 9 packet, which I have right here if you want to look at it.
She has it at her fingertips.
That's true, it's right
I
there.
do.
Nice.
You're jealous, aren't you?
I am.
All right, any additional discussion on the second readings of those policy items? All right, other discussion items, number I, discuss reinstating the position of transportation maintenance and custodial maintenance supervisor, and the related updated salary schedule. Information was provided to you in the December board packet.
Just so you know, in case you didn't know, I am the maintenance custodian supervisor, and he should be fired at this point in time. We need to do something in regards to make sure this group, the scheduling becomes an issue, the follow-through, the ability to check, it's not been done the way it needs to be done. We had stated, we created this position, I think, in 2012 or 13, and it was it later than that, Joe?
Yes,
Later than that?
maybe
Okay, for it. And it worked for it lasted for a very short period of time. It's a job that takes time, because I believe that this person should be able to meet with all 3 shifts of our custodian staff. And that's important to me, that they have the ability to meet with those people each time. If they need something, they should be able to talk to them, find them, have a person to go to. And as it's written, we can do that.
Because we did have a person in the custodial maintenance supervisor, and we decreased that job to a part-time, and then we eliminated it.
That's correct.
Am I right? But we still have the full-time transportation.
That's correct.
And you feel that person has enough time to do both?
Yes, because of the hours he spends here.
Is that a 12-hour day? Is he here 12 hours because he's that committed, or is he here 12 hours because he's currently paid for 12 hours? And that's just a point of curiosity on my.
I do not believe he's paid for 12-hour days.
Okay.
He's based on an 8-hour day. He's
salary.
salary, but his, but that,
Okay.
that expectation is 8 hours on
Right.
every one of us is 8 hours, but, yeah.
He's just very committed.
That, and I'm be honest, there's days that he says, can I run home? And yeah, because at 10 o'clock, I'm not sure what's happening transportation-wise that, you know what I'm saying, that we require him to be here. But he spends a great deal of time here, and, I mean, we will post it, and I'm not saying we wouldn't fill it separately, wouldn't, but, there's not a lot of people who have a job title now that would allow them to be able to do this, in the way that I wanna do it. So, I would bring us back in February to vote to reinstate that position. You had seen the salary schedule, you've seen the job description, so,
Additional discussion on that item? Item J, cash balance policy. Discussed there.
is there anything else, Jill, to do to this?
Yes, Mrs. Young had wanted to see some
Okay.
numbers also on it from prior years. So what I did was I went ahead and pulled our 5-year forecast, went back to 16, and went up. And just kind of, I'm gonna pass this out so you guys can look, because I know I'm gonna have to explain it with my color coding. So what I did was I pulled our, I pulled our overall revenue line on our 5-year forecast, all based on the November 5-year forecast, and then our overall expenditure line, and then what our over-under would be on that. And then had the cash balance. Now remember, we have an unreserved cash balance too, where we say we're probably gonna have 180,000 in encumbrances, so we have to pull that out. That's where that unreserved, so line 15.01. So from the cash balance policy that Mr. Kern had brought in and we've been discussing, I took 15% as that light blue. And so I took 15% of our prior year expenditures, and that's where that blue number comes in. So it's the 15% of the prior year expenditures that we can't go below. And so we never hit that, you won't see any blue there. So 45% is the percentage also that we were talking about. So I pulled the 45% cash ceiling balance, and you'll see that number of the prior year's expenditures. So basically, it's if our cash balance hits 45% or more of our prior years, then we would look, Mr. Dick and I would then have to let the board know, and we would have to then go in and look at bringing either that down to the 45%. So that's basically what I did. If we went in and we hit 45%, you'll see any of that purple, that's when we would do it. And that's the amount then that we would need to transfer down. You'll see transfer to PI if we used line 7.02, which is our regular cash balance, or transfer to PI if we use line 15.01. So if we needed to keep our cash balance no more than 45% ceiling, if you just look at FY '17. Then we would have transferred 6.9 million using our cash balance line 7.02 to bring that 13.8 million down to the 6,969,375, which is the 45%.
And PI is?
Permanent improvement.
I know, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
Yes,
that.
that's
question.
fine.
So this is at the, and I remember this was kind of something that was, I know Mr. Kern was keen to kind of clarify. It doesn't mean that we automatically have to, it just
Correct.
triggers at 45% a discussion about whether or not we think it's
What do we do with it?
reasonable.
Yes.
So
Yes.
on the numbers you've provided, the 15% cash reserve is, I don't like that wording, cash reserve. We need to add more wording to that so it's clear, because it's really of the prior year's expenditures.
That's what our cash reserve says. We can't, at 15%.
This is 12 now, isn't
It
it?
is 12 right now.
Okay.
But the 15, it just says that with all, basically I look at it
But
as
our
with
cash
all
reserves-
reservations, we cannot go below. This is 15% of what our cash is. We've got a real problem if we go below
Right.
That's
that.
the minimum.
Yes.
And then the
it's minimum we can
45%
have
is
in
our
there.
cash ceiling balance of the prior year's expenditures.
Mhm.
And out of these that you've looked at, have any of them hit those targets?
Yes, so FY '17, '18, and '19 would have hit those targets. And that's what I use, transferred to PI. I used either the 7.02, so in FY '17, our cash balance on line 7.02 was 13,889,531. The 45% cash ceiling balance would have said if we go over, that's the purple number, 6,969,375, then we need to let you guys know. And if you wanted to pull it down to that 45%, we would have transferred 6,920,156, or trying to figure out what to do with that additional amount over the 45%.
The main goal with this was to try to avoid getting a huge cash balance.
Right.
And,
That we don't need, basically.
right,
And the idea being that if it gets to that ceiling, then, we need to talk about what to do.
and we're,
And then ultimately, if we transfer into the permanent improvement, because our permanent improvement funds are going away with those two,
Yeah, yes.
and so we'll need some to set aside for that. Of course, my question now, though, in terms of this policy is, how much do we, what is too much in permanent improvement too, so,
Right.
and which would
Once
be.
it goes-
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I'm
think-
sorry, I was just gonna say, once it goes into permanent improvement, we can't take it back out, correct?
Correct.
So,
So
that is
in,
something to think about.
go ahead.
Go
So in 2020, our 15% minimum would have been the 2.7 million,
Correct.
and the max would have been 8.2 million.
8.2,
So we were just under that at the 8.213.
correct. So
Okay.
we would be under that, and would not need to look at any of those funds under there to transfer out. That's the
Gotcha.
additional amount.
Okay.
I tried to make it simple looking for that. I hope it,
I think that makes it so that it, I mean, that would be the ideal. We don't wanna have to look at these things and say we need to bring our cash balance down. We should be
correct.
spending what we need to spend, but have enough left over so that,
For planning purposes.
yes, and, our rainy day fund
Right. So that's, that's,
cover expenditures.
was obviously the goal with this, was to, what is a good ceiling, that we would have plenty of money available if need be, but not more than what we need. And if it gets to the point where we're getting more than what we need, do we transfer it into the permanent improvement, or something else if we need to do, or the ultimate thing we talked about is we do as a board have the ability to lower the percentage that we collect via the earned income as well. So if it gets to be multiple years where we're looking at this situation where it generated more and we think we have done, we have the services we need and there's nothing else coming up in terms of improvements via education or whatever, and we're still generating more than above that ceiling, then we would, could potentially lower from the percentage in the earned income levy by 0.25%.
And is there a recommended percentage of your income or expenses you should have in a permanent improvement fund? Is there?
There's not a recommendation on that. It really depends on how you're using your permanent improvement funds. Like I had said in another, it might have been last month's meeting, you know, if you are doing all of your capital outlay, your technology, your buses and everything is going to be paid out of your permanent improvement, you're going to have a significantly higher budget out of there and wanna have a different cash balance than someone like us who is not doing that. We still spend our money out of the general fund for our buses and for our technology. So when you're looking at that, it just depends on how you wanna do that usage.
When you say that we're spending out of the general fund for a bus, let's say, for example, do you literally spend it from general fund, or do you transfer it from general fund to P&I and then buy the bus?
No, we spend it out of general fund.
Okay.
So when I do any audit reports or when I'm looking at my capital outlay, I will pull all of my 600s out of my general fund and any permanent improvement, but I'll pull 600s from any fund to look at that.
I was curious, so, obviously 2020 and beyond are forecasted. And it looks like even in 17, 18, and 19, when we didn't have a levy, we were hitting that 45% cash mark. So I'm curious why, once we start bringing in money, why we don't think we would be hitting that target.
Well, because we have already started pulling down our cash balance, and with our expenditures, the way that they're going, they are going up. So you'll see back in 15-16, so fiscal year 16, we were at 15.4 million. We're now in the 18s,
Right.
going into the 19. So your 45% is going to go higher anyways because of your prior year expenditures.
Okay.
Plus, part of the issue was, we had generated a large cash balance. We had, I mean, it was even more than the 13. Which is what we're trying to avoid with this policy, is getting it to that point again. And so it's been getting spent down over the course of all the failed levy attempts and so forth,
Right.
because we were spending more than we had. And so right now, it's gotten finally to the point where, based on this policy, we're in that zone, that comfort zone where we would like it to be. And as long as things balance out, and in terms of the income that comes from that levy and our expenses and so forth, we'll stay there, hopefully. But the goal with this is that it isn't that way, and maybe they're generating more than we realized, and, because that happened last time, it generated more than what we were given estimated.
I guess that's all I was wondering, is how we
Yeah.
are making sure we're not coming back and revisiting this like constantly, you know.
Well, if you look at the numbers, we are close. In 2020, the 45% is 8,257, and we're, if you look at the unreserved balance, it's 8,013. So any sway in anything that we may save and not spend that year, or any additional revenue, we potentially could hit that 45%. Same with FY21. You're still close there, so that's something worth looking at. And that's why that capital plan is so important, because when we're looking at that and we're trying to get those projects, we're not only just doing it from our general fund, but we're doing it from what's gonna come out of permanent improvement, what's gonna come out of facilities maintenance, things like that. So we can look at those other projects to know where we need to transfer money into or use general fund dollars for. Okay.
When we initially started talking about this, that we kind of discussed it as like almost like a requirement. If we reach the ceiling, then we would lower the levy amount, but by putting it to where we'd be notified about it and we would discuss it, that allows you to actually look to see what kind of expenses do we have coming up. I mean, do we have any big expenses and so forth coming up, so that it's not an automatic reduction, because it could really hurt us if that were to take place. But it requires that we then look at the situation and what's coming up and where things are at, and hopefully make the wise decisions to where we
So
move
the
forward.
language of the policy is more, we may,
Right.
rather than we will.
Are you going to update the wording of that policy and send that out to us? Is that the plan?
We will do that.
'cause I know we had a lot of suggestions
And
for
we've
the
had
last
so many
time.
revisions and versions of it,
Right.
that I get
Right.
confused and
Yeah,
just throw
and
a
I don't
date.
know if the policy needs to have the permanent improvement number or cap on it, but it's certainly.
Yeah, I
something-
don't even know if
It's
we
certainly
had.
something to consider, well, I don't know, that I
Did
guess.
we say specifically permanent improvement, or?
Yeah, that's what we talked about doing.
We talked about it, but it wasn't wording that we were specifically going to put in
Yes,
to it.
we were gonna do something, or
Right.
consider something.
Right. We saw that as a good idea because, like I said, our permanent improvement levies are going away.
Yes.
The
So this would be some.
Facilities maintenance,
Yeah, the
not
facility,
permanent
okay,
improvement.
well,
Yeah,
money, yeah.
yes.
So,
Okay.
so this would help offset
Mhm.
the loss of those funds by putting it there. But again, whether or not, I don't know that it needs to be a specific number for the PI thing, or just to know that, we'll put some in there, but then certainly we'll need to get some idea. If we ever get to that point, which I guess will be a good problem to have, if we ever get to that point, what's a good amount to move to there, and once we've reached that amount, then then what do we do?
Hopefully this helped a little bit, because even when I was looking at it, it was pretty significant prior to, and I was like, if we would have moved $6.9 million at that point in time, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's a treasure trove.
Yeah, well, that's the whole goal with this is it won't ever get that unbalanced.
Correct.
It won't ever get that
And
unbalanced
plus
again.
it keeps, with the policy, I would hope that it keeps it in our minds, that
Right.
it doesn't just fall to the wayside until it's like, well,
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, any other discussion on that? The next item, K, create the work session.
Out of the 6 dates that I sent, I did not get a consensus where everybody could be at one of those dates. The 2 dates that come closest to match everybody is the 15th of this week and the 25th, which, I don't know if anyone noticed it. I said 7 PM to 11 PM on Saturday, January 25th, just so you know, I will not be there from 7 to 11 PM. It should have been 8 AM to 12 PM.
Yeah, I agreed because it was evening, because there's a game during the day.
Oh, so,
I don't wanna be here until 11 PM, but I was like, well, that's what JB wants
no,
to do, okay.
it's not what JB wants. And that's the important thing, it's I'm at your will. So, I don't know if you want me to send out more dates, if you wanna pick one of these dates and go with it.
What's
So,
the game that's on the
The
25th?
Hamilton Township is on the.
up there,
It's in the morning. It's an early game?
yeah,
It's an early game, we do
Really?
that.
which date is this?
the 25th.
25th,
I can't attend at all on the 25th.
oh,
It's
there you go.
completely out of the question.
Never mind, doesn't matter when the game is.
Sorry.
Oh, no, don't be.
And Brandon can't be here on this Wednesday, so,
He said Wednesdays are not good.
that's correct,
He said that at the last meeting.
so,
We've got obviously some things to discuss with our gym policy,
yes.
so we don't wanna put it off too long. We're getting into the-
What about the 1st of February? It's a Saturday, no, you don't do Saturdays?
I just can't do those 2 Saturdays.
Okay, well, I didn't know, I didn't wanna keep throwing out Saturday days, if that
No,
was a good day.
Most
for-
Saturdays are fine, just those 2.
Those 2 are not fine, gotcha. Saturday the 8th?
Well, do you want me to send out another doodle poll for the first week of February? See if we can, I'll do the first 2 weeks and see if we can find a date then. We may get to the point where we have to pick a date that,
Most people.
yes.
What about Friday or Saturday, February the 8th during the day? That's the week you're looking at. We already know Brandon can't do Wednesdays.
I wouldn't be able to make it to that, but
Okay.
don't not have it just because I can't make it, but I'll be in.
If we're looking into February anyways, you might as well send the pool thing out and do.
Yeah,
Otherwise, any other Saturday I'm fine with, but that's a military weekend for me, so.
gotcha.
I mean, you can't tell them
I
that,
didn't say, you can't.
come on.
You know, they're getting a little picky about it these days.
We don't supersede it.
Used to be you could say, I'm not gonna be there if you had, if you could make up a good reason, but they don't Now,
They frown upon that?
you better be on your deathbed.
Okay, I will take care of that.
All right, so on to facilities usage, which I guess is the gym question.
And I put our existing policy in the manual, in the packet. And I think you all have a copy of the one Mr. Kern brought to us last week. I don't know how much you want to discuss. I don't know if you want to give me suggestions or ask me questions so I can get answers for you in regards to,
I had questions.
good.
So,
Oh, I found it, I tagged it, okay.
we ended up with, there's actually 2 policies in here that you gave us. So I'm confused about which policy we're using.
11 is, this is the proposed one. I believe it's brand.
So 11 is the proposed, right? That's how I
Yeah,
have it.
that's what it
Okay.
says.
Yes.
And then 12 is our current.
Oh, 12 is
Correct me if I'm wrong.
11 is the proposed, 12 is the current that we follow.
That's
Now-
what I missed, sorry.
That's right. Now, I only, the one thing I think we need to be careful of is creating 2 different policies. One that's called for youth activities. I think we can incorporate youth activities into our current policy. That would be my suggestion. But again, that's one of the reasons we need some time to sit down and discuss some of these things that's on here.
One question I had was, in terms of scheduling public events that are not, they're not sanctioned activities by the school. In other words, they're not practices, club meetings, rehearsals, something where a volunteer who's had a background check or a coach or somebody who has some level of accountability to the school is gonna be present and in charge of it. Do we wanna go as far as having public events here where we don't, you know what I mean? Does that make any sense? Like,
Sure.
at least with all of these other activities, with practices, club meetings, rehearsals, what have you, there's gonna be somebody in charge that has,
A tie to the board.
thank you, yeah, who's been approved, they've been vetted, and we have something we can take away from them that it's not just a one-time like, oh, well, we tried to have a meeting there, we didn't do the right thing, now we can't have meetings anywhere, any there anymore. Well, like if it's a school affiliated thing, like a sports team, that would be obviously, they have more skin in the game, I
Mhm.
guess. So, to me, and this is just because it's my first chance to weigh in, personally, I don't think we need to go that far, to open the school building to organizations or, to people that aren't directly affiliated with the school in some fashion. And that's just me. And the other thing is it does not clarify in here, and I think that we should identify it when we make the policy, who the scheduling authority is. Just because that's obviously from previous discussions was a point of contention. So I think the current policy, to be clear, I'm in favor of having access to the building, but there's still some questions on who and who does the scheduling and who's allowed in, and that's just my 2 cents.
So, a couple questions. One, did we ever contact some of the other schools they mentioned at the last meeting to ask them how they're doing that? Because they kind of indicated, some of the public, that they are able to just go into these schools at any time. So were we able to contact?
Well, I think one of the statements that Mr. Earl made was that his brother and sister-in-law could go into the building, but I do believe both of them are coaches.
And just because they have a key and have the ability to get in doesn't necessarily mean that they, for instance, I wonder if that school knows that people who aren't from that school are coming in and practicing, what they would say about it if they did know.
And we've talked to Bloom Carroll, from what we've got from 2 different coaches, they're not scheduling their people into the building. Those teams go find outside resources such as churches, YMCA's, the facilities to rent. I have not talked to Fairfield Union. Let me think. That's the only two I've talked to so far, so.
Okay, and that, we seem to have a lot of policies that encompass this. We have KG, KGR, KGE, goes on for pages and pages.
Well,
On who has access to the building?
no, KGR, R stands for restrictions, requirements, regulations. So the policy itself as a community facility is the KG. And if you
Okay.
notice, many of our policies have the first two, or how many letters it is, then they have a dash, and that's for the
And then
regulations.
A, B, C, D, E, F,
Yes.
G.
And then they have the dash R, which is the regulations.
Right, it seems like some of these don't match, like the individual liability. All groups, clubs, and teams must schedule with their respective principals. Do we really do that? I have a hard time imagining that our poor principals are involved in scheduling. Thought all that went through the district office.
Well, for like for school activities, I believe they are approving that through our FMX.
What do you mean
am I
by
correct?
school activities? Sports or clubs?
Okay, like Mr. Evans does the sports scheduling of the team, and Mrs. Feliciano.
Right.
Ms. Meyer asked Mr. Hinton, and she goes an FMX
Or
band.
band?
Mrs. Feliciano does the activities for our sports, trip tickets, and also go through FMX. And here, I think part lies the issue that it's important to take care of, and it talks about school-related organizations. And I sometimes think everybody thinks because they splash Amanda-Clearcreek across the front of their shirt, that they assume or think it is a school-related organization, and that is not correct. Biddy wrestling is not a part of our school organization. Biddy football, Biddy anything is not a school-related organization. So when that, you start separating that from who gets priorities, those type of things, is where much of the problem starts with.
Are there any elementary organizations that are technically school related? That's what I was.
So, yeah, so could you just clarify for me, Biddy being what, K through 6?
5.
K
Yeah,
through
K through
5?
6, yes.
K
I'm
through
sorry.
6?
Yes.
And they're just not officially sanctioned?
Sanctioned. We do not pay for anything that they do.
Right,
So,
so basically that would put the K through 6 to the bottom of the priority
yes,
all the time.
yes.
And do we,
And I hate to put it that way,
No,
but that's, when it comes to scheduling, we will, varsity sports will probably get the first one, then your secondary, your reserve freshman, middle school would then get the next.
are we still scheduling though? We did, back in, when my kids were littler, the K2 gym was busy 4 nights a week with Biddy basketball.
Yes,
Are we still, we're
Yes.
still doing that? And all the teams practice over there?
not,
So-
all- there's some teams, I'll be honest,
Our intramural
K3
team?
groups would probably more apt to schedule their practice in that gym than other groups because of the size of it.
I
And
can't
the size
remember
of
that.
the kid.
The 5th and 6th grade band kids, they would be school sanctioned.
Yes, they are.
So
Yes,
I was trying to think of an organization that,
We have concerts throughout
Yes.
the year.
so
and
they would
those are
be above
yes.
those others that are.
So, Mr.
Riddle.
and Mr. Hines both were speaking, I think, in relation to those, K through 6.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's,
So the people that are very loudly advocating in favor of having access are the ones that would be at the lowest priority in terms of gaining that access. So another thing to think about is that as it's currently written, this policy might not make them all too happy if they find out like, oh, well, we have access, or we could have access, but we're the lowest priority.
I think that part of the reason why they like the Sunday issue, and they keep bringing up, having access during Sundays, and some other times that we typically don't, I think it's probably the because
Yeah.
they don't have priorities
Which-
during the
and-
week and they don't have, so they can't get gym time, and so they're
Right.
taking
I
winter
think
some time to
it's the
read.
time off that's really bothering them as well, like Christmas
Sure.
break, for
Yeah,
Right.
instance.
yeah, that was a long break.
It was a long break that gyms wouldn't have been utilized the way we do when it's after school and they're all being used. I'm not a big fan of the whole Sunday afternoon thing.
Me either.
I'm nervous that if we say, okay, well, we're gonna open our gyms up on Sunday afternoons, then where does it end for our other sports that are 7 through 12? And those coaches say, oh, well, if they're gonna open the gym on Sunday for Biddy or whoever, then we're gonna have our practices, we're gonna have our students never have an afternoon family time. I'm not a big fan of Sunday afternoon.
And I wanna make sure that,
Maybe Mr. Hinton,
I
are they
would
not
be-
allowed now, or?
The difference there is, Mrs. Som, is very important. You guys mentioned, sorry to weigh in, Mr. Dick.
it's fine.
But if our high school, if we don't want our school affiliated grades 7 through 12 coaches to do that, we can tell our grades 7 through 12 coaches, because we evaluate them. We pick and choose, well, sometimes we don't have a lot of choice, but we evaluate them. We can control that they can't go 7 days a week.
Okay,
The issue becomes, my worry would be is that if you open it up, there's no, and if somebody can get access for third grade girls basketball 5 days a week, will they go 5 days a week, third grade girls basketball? I say that because I'm third grade girls basketball.
oh,
But, so we don't have any
Would you?
control over that, or how long they go, because we don't get to evaluate or know who is coaching these teams either, because it's not school affiliated.
They're not
So we don't have control over who is trying to access the building. I think that's probably the scariest part of this, is that we don't have that control. And we can't control if somebody in 4th grade wants to have 7 days a week of stuff, if they're trying to get the gym here in Amanda 4 days and rent the YMCA 3 days, and they're gonna try to do 7 days in a row, that's too much, but we don't have any control over that. That would be my fear in regards to it, is that lack of control.
Could we put a limitation on how many days a week
So
certain
where-
things could?
Or just have.
But then we'll have control from, that's what I'm saying, they could go to the YMCA the other days. We don't have any, what if we did put the limitation and they didn't do it? We don't have any way of, if the 7th grade coach does it, we have an evaluative measure against it.
so where are you practicing for your K-3? Are you getting?
We're in the
practice-
K2 gym.
And do you still do 2 nights a week? Is that how it still works? It's like an hour and a half, each team gets 2 nights?
One
a
or
week?
two. Yes, right now, our current biddy teams, younger teams, with exception of K through 2, so 3 through 6, and we have a few grades that have multiple grades, have at least 2 practices of an hour and a half a week. On Mondays through Thursdays.
Ms. Meyer?
Well, just to bring up, and I don't know if you remember this conversation, Mr. Dick, my first couple of years here, we used to have the Sunday spring concert,
Uh-huh.
the ice cream social. And we had the conversation and exactly what you're saying about Sunday time, and you asked me to stop having that concert on those days. Or, I don't wanna say directed, but that's what it came down to, for that exact same thing as family time, and, and we switched and it's went fine. But that was 19 years ago, so that's been an ongoing
Right.
issue to try to come up with that family time, and with the kids having more and more things, that's harder to find that family time.
So if a kid doesn't show up to practice, it's gonna be reflected in the amount of playing time they get. And I feel personally, just me as a parent whose child is just now starting to get involved in activities, it is nice to be able to rely on having one day a week where you know you're not gonna be running somewhere. It's a day of rest. And furthermore, in terms of figuring out who's gonna clean up and speaking about the custodians, it'll be a lot easier to say, we're just looking at Saturdays and days that maybe school's not in session, like over the winter break, but, at least that's one day that we can say, you clean up Saturday evening and then nobody's here
Right.
and school's Monday.
And I don't want this to be anything other than, I will follow through with the policy, whatever you create. I want that to be clear. One of the things that I think about, like over Christmas break, it becomes making sure we have custodial coverage. And I sometimes think people do not take that as as important as I do, because I do think it's important that we leave a building to be received the next day, regardless of whether we're in session or not. And I'm concerned about that, which I'm not saying we can't work through that. I mean, we can figure that part of it out. But if that is something that you feel that we need to do and put in policy to be, while we're not in session, obviously we would not be in session like on Martin Luther King Day because it's a federal holiday, and we will not have any custodians here. So, like, again, that concerns me when we start that process, but if that's what we choose to do, then that's what we'll follow and create the schedule for that.
Remind me, when we do the K through 6 sporting events, which is mainly what these are, sporting
Yes.
events, when we open our facilities to them now, because we have the video wrestling going on and the basketball, do we require anything out of those coaches as far as a volunteer form or anything? I don't remember.
For the bidding, no.
For the bidding, no, it's just scheduled and
It's
they're
whoever-
there and.
Now,
we don't
like,
do that.
we have a, if you need to go, you're fine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for like,
Thank you.
the bidding, like, part right now, like, I'll give you like football, bidding football, we charge for a custodian to clean up on Sunday.
Down with the field.
Yes.
Gotcha.
The bidding wrestling, there's a little bit of an advantage in regards to football and wrestling at this point. There's always been at least one contact person to, when they call us and say, we need to do this, or we can't do that, or we gotta change that, it's usually one person. With basketball, we have multiple people who, there's, for lack of a better word, there's not an organized group of basketball bidding parents who says, you will be our contact person for the females, you'll be our contact person for males, so that when practice gets canceled by our, sometimes, like just say it's tonight, it's a middle school basketball coach comes and says, hey, you know what, we're not gonna practice at 4 o'clock. Well, that means that gym is sitting empty from 4 to 5:30. If we had some kind of organized group to call and say, hey, are you aware that the 77 gym is available from 4 to 5:30? You can move up a group or bring an extra group in, and right now we don't have that piece that I know of. I don't know of anybody who's that contact person for Biddy basketball.
And that's where the appropriate scheduling authority and having somebody designated would be, I think, very helpful in that regard. And Mr. Kern felt like maybe, you know, it was too much work, especially if we do expand the facility usage through a new policy. It's too much work for whoever has currently been doing it, which seems like a fair, I mean,
Sure.
without knowing anything myself,
Right.
just knowing that if we're gonna expand it significantly, that seems like a fair statement.
And I'll be honest, that's one of the things we look at with this scheduling the doors. I mean, she's handled it twice, you know what I'm saying? She scheduled the event, then she scheduled the doors, where, I know it doesn't mean like, it doesn't like a whole lot of things, but when you talk about the amount of events that we have in a week's time, when she's duplicating some of that work, you know, it seems foolish. If there's a system out there that allows us to do both at the same time, then we need to utilize that. Because again, it's a money saver. I don't care how you look at it. If she's spending 3 minutes to do each activity, you're gonna basically cut that in half, so.
I guess I'm not opposed to, and it really sounds like it comes down to, because I'm opposed to the whole Sunday afternoon business. But I'm not opposed to when school's not in session over Christmas break, fair break, or whatever break, because I think we typically have custodians. And the K2 gym and the 77 gym lend themselves to be isolated from everywhere else. Because in the K2 gym, they have those double doors that lock and you can't get into the rest of the school. The same thing for the 77 gym. I'm not opposed to opening up that, as long as it doesn't violate any, because I know the contracts with the custodians and stuff, there's cleaning, like you're not allowed to clean up.
Right, there's a concern, there's a part of the contract that talks to,
Because I know,
taking work from custodians when you clean up the facility, that is.
because when we did the game managers, that was a,
And that part of it in this policy is, 6, on the KGR talks about Those school-related organizations or private groups and school-related activities may do their own cleaning without paying the custodial fee.
I saw that and I wondered if that was current
That is current.
and the custodians are okay with that?
That is basically the game manager piece. So, after the game, we'll go up and pick up stuff out of the bleachers. The custodians will still come in like a third shift to blow out the dust and all that, whatever they do. But we do a lot of the.
But the game managers or whatever,
Yes.
pick up the trash and
We
whatever.
put the chairs up, scores table away, so the floor can be swept. And that's our group doing our activity by our people. So,
We have janitors that work on the weekends.
no.
No.
And part of the issue too, we have a third shift that goes off on Friday mornings at 6:30, 6 or 6:30. And that is, they're not back until Sunday night at 10. So, 10 PM. So that third shift is a 10 to 6:30 PM.
So do they
It's
work-
10 PM to 6:30 AM shift.
So they work Sunday night through Thursday night?
Yes.
And they're off Friday and Saturday?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, which becomes the issue, one of the things we talked about with, trying to schedule, like, I think at one time, Mr. Evans told me that they tried to do Friday evenings and alternate girls this week, boys next week, so that they would, for the K2 gym. Because usually we have activities on Friday night in our, and Mr. Kearns brought up the part about scheduling gym 2 on Friday evenings. So again, I have no problem. Let's take a look at that and consider those as a possibility to get more time. But then you're gonna get, but Friday night, that means there's nobody that's covering gym 2.
Until
Sunday
Monday morning?
Sunday night at 10
And
p.m.
do we really expect it to be? I guess, let me put it this way, the folks that might be using it Saturday, let's just hypothetically say we're gonna open it up on Saturdays. Do we feel that the people who might use it Saturday will be just grossly disgusted by what they might find if it doesn't get cleaned Friday night? And my guess is that they probably won't care.
Well, there's been times that it has, I will tell you, I came to the game Saturday morning, for the junior high, game. There was a wrestling tournament in there on Friday night. You walk into that gymnasium, 77 gym, and it's immaculate. Now again, they had hired somebody because of outside activity. They had hired someone, but it didn't mean a game manager or coach or someone else setting up, cleaning up. It was done. So I asked Mr. Starr after the game, I said, how did you find the gym this morning? He said, it was great. He said, there's no problem whatsoever. However, I got my email at 6:30 this morning, because I thought I did a very good job cleaning up after the game Saturday. However, there was an activity after me that was school related, that we didn't bring a custodian in, and the floor had not been mopped, and, so it becomes an issue then who is.
Do we have a lot of gym time to spare during the winter, except on those days that we're not in session?
What's that? And
Seems
Mrs.
like-
Tom, that's where I think part of the problem is that.
Because we're talking about all those gyms, but I know when my kids were in Biddy Swords, it was hard to get gym time.
But we schedule a lot of times, and this is where I think the frustration for myself, Mr. Kern comes in. The frustration we have is that many times people will schedule
And then not use it.
and not show up. And so therefore,
It's frustrating.
when you walk in at 7:30 to start your practice, and you get there at 7:15, and there's no signs that there's been a person in the gym, or there's no one hanging around,
And you waited to get
Yes.
that time.
and because I get concerned about, I forget which school talks that they want their biddy to be finished by 10 o'clock at night. I think that's entirely too late. And again, I'm not trying to be the moral police, I'm not trying to be the parent police, but 10 o'clock on a school night to finish up.
Mr. Hinton,
Biddy athletics.
people will take advantage of it if you
Yeah,
let them.
So, we try to have them all by 9, so, and I will tell you, this is the part that the frustrating part, I guess, I think is, for me, is that I think we have probably more gym space than anybody else, and I'm trying to figure out how to
Well, I know that's
utilize
what
that
we
to
figured
its
out.
fullest extent.
Would the custodians, is part of the issue that the custodians would not be open to working additional hours, or is it just a matter of funding?
Oh, I got people at work. I would have no problem finding
Because
custodians.
Another
Well,
thing-
we got possible overtime for custodians, you got possible substitutes, that gets paid at a different rate. But the issue becomes, who's paying for that?
Well, and so with the passing of the levy, and this is a kind of a blanket generalization, so it might be off base, but to me, the people who are asking for this, who are begging for time in the school, we want to be in the school, we want to be here more than we already are, those are likely the people who were voting yes. And not to say that we should discount people who voted no, but I would think that they would want the school to be utilized to the fullest extent it possibly could as well. Because if they have to pay for it, they might as well get to use it.
Whether they voted yes or no.
Whether they voted
they're
yes
paying
or
for
not.
it anyway.
And so to me, if it's a matter of coming up with the money, I feel like it's a worthwhile endeavor.
But here, I would think you would find people to say, I didn't vote for 2% to pay for non-school related activities. And again, I'm not saying this is not, because it is a very fine line between being school related and not being, because if you, those who, I think you're being new, one of the school responsibilities we asked our coaches to do, that we approved the job description, I think in November, was that they were to be involved in their biddy program. And I don't know if you were at the board at the time, but at one time, this board had asked for the coaches to not be involved in biddy sports. So, and to me, I think we gotta have some involvement from there, because I would tell you, Mr. Justice took his biddy K2 kids in Saturday, and he was there with them during a basketball practice in the K2 gym. To me, that's part of his responsibilities. If you wanna build a program, you need to be involved with them. And so therefore, they had a little Saturday morning get together, but Jamie Justice was there with them. So that's how you justify, yes, the fact that we did have a custodian there for him to have his biddy program. And in the past, many, many years ago, Ms. Meyer talks about the 20 years ago now, our coaches were doing things with our kids every Saturday morning, and the building was open and the coaches there were with them. They had their varsity players to work with them. And that's kind of went by the wayside for whatever reason. I know they're trying to bring some of that back now. And that's how they, I don't want to say the word get around, but that's how, when you have a job responsibility written for the coaches to be involved in the bid program, that's really the only time they get to be with them is on Saturday morning. Because otherwise, I mean, they're taking care of their practices on every other night of the week.
I say a couple years ago, the boys coach did a clinic every Saturday morning.
And that's basically what Mr. Justice is doing.
8 to 10 over here in the smaller gym, whatever, gym 2.
And there's a part of me that thinks Mr. Justice ought to be living here now. But I mean, I think if he was to be here and we did after the biddy, he had a practice, his biddy coaches had practice, I'm not looking for that to go away because Mr. Justice is here. So I mean, we're tying two things together because Mr. Kern and I had the same conversation probably a year and a half ago about the concern of the varsity coaches not being involved with biddy programs.
That's what he mentioned in our basketball program
Yeah.
when it took a bit of a turn.
Yeah, so I mean, it's important that to happen. So I will, again, I've got your questions here. I will see where the agenda or the policy that Mr. Kern brought, we can tie it into places within this, so.
I'd rather see you take the policy that he brought and put it into our current,
Okay. Yes,
incorporate it into our OSBA recommended
Yes.
policy versus,
right,
do you see what I'm saying?
absolutely,
Let's not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah,
Let's improve it.
yep, exactly, okay, that's fine.
but I would like to see if we can somehow, if it's financially feasible to open the gym up during those days that
Yes,
school's not in session, not Sundays.
Yeah, I kind of like that, if we just say no Sundays, so let's consider that.
that's fine. And what about, the one question, snow days, we do not permit biddies and during snow days.
I feel like that would be a risk where if we're saying it's unsafe to be at the school
Okay.
to learn, then it should be unsafe to be at the school to play sports. And I guarantee there would be parents who would say, this is, what, if we can't go learn, why are we going and playing sports? And it just seems to me like too much of a liability.
Because we do allow our varsity people, or our varsity sports end in the afternoon. I mean, depending upon the road.
As
I
long
mean,
as it's not.
but we have backed off on our middle school, lower level teams not practicing on those days as well.
And then,
We make it entirely voluntary at that age, that's what, like junior varsity.
and clarifying who the appropriate scheduling.
Yes, I got that here, appropriate schedule authority.
I'll just mention though, just like, I don't know if it's devil's advocate or just alternative idea. I'm not excited about the Sundays, particularly in the morning. But one of the things that was mentioned was the concern about, our kids they've had 18 games now, only 2 at home, and a lot of times with those youth basketball things, they'll have like a weekend little tournament thing or whatever,
We can ask.
and they're usually Saturday, Sunday.
I will tell you, Mr. James and Mr. Justice have both asked me about having a Saturday, Sunday tournament here. I've told them they're more than welcome to have a Saturday, Sunday tournament. So I don't know if that's included in Mr. Hines' too, he's talking about or not. And again, I'm not saying that that's 3 makes it any better, but it's the same thing goes along with volleyball too. Most of the volleyball biddies take place on Sunday afternoons, and many times we do not get to.
Maybe we could make it as a recommend, not having it on Sunday, but not completely
No,
eliminate.
yes. I
And some of those leagues I do, they are on Sunday afternoons, and I'm guessing,
Or maybe
I
open
just
it to
don't
a
wanna
game,
see
but not
practices every Sunday afternoon
I
for
agree.
students. Like,
Well,
if you
that's-
sign your student up to play volleyball, and you know that those volleyball games are gonna be Sunday afternoons, and most of them are pretty respectful that they don't start until noon or 1 o'clock. They're reasonable that you can do your church activities or whatever and make them, if that's what you choose to do as a family. Just don't wanna see it opened up for Sunday afternoons or Sunday practices every.
That's what I just said, maybe we allow for Sunday games to be scheduled, not practices.
But I think Mr. Hines also said that some of them though were just plain, they couldn't play here during the break, not just
Yes,
Sunday.
that was concerned. And the other issue, I'm not suggesting we have to, is there a limit that we want to say of home activity, like you permitted, like you'd be permitted to have 2 home Sunday afternoon basketball tournaments, well, that's what they usually call them, you know what I'm saying? Because then again, I know what's coming down the pike is Russell's gonna say, well, if boys and girls basketball get a Sunday, do we get a Sunday?
You
like I
get
said-
bitty football every Sunday. I mean, it's not indoors, but it is at our facility. It's every Sunday afternoon. I know we look at it, perceive it sometimes differently because it's an outside
Sure.
sport, but it's still our facility.
still involves our
we're
people.
Maintaining it.
Let it be noted that we have discussed it.
Oh,
Thoroughly.
No one can say we did on the
We'll
work
have a work
session.
session where I'm sure we'll get discussed even more.
How many more items do we have on?
We're on
on
none.
this meeting?
Do we have the executive session?
Yes.
Okay. Approved. Any other discussion on the discussion items? If
Can I
not,
bring up one thing, Mr. Dick?
Yes.
School calendar for 21,
I have given it to the administrators to take a look at, and
Okay,
I
so
should
it's-
have it to you for the February.
in the
I'll meet with
pipeline.
the association between now and then we should have a recommendation for the.
Okay.
I will tell you up front, I'm trying to start it later.
Don't go any later.
What do you mean? No, wait a minute, you're starting to talk like us teachers. We want to start after Labor Day, have a full week at fair, 2 weeks at Christmas, week at spring break, and be done for Memorial Day.
Yes.
Can't be done. I'm just telling you,
I
it
want my
can't be
kids at home
done.
with Sunday afternoon.
Sunday afternoon, yeah, we're gonna have school on Sunday afternoons.
I like my kids at home.
all right. Approved motion, and item 10, approved motion to enter an executive session to discuss the employment of public officials. Is there a motion?
I move.
Moves there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Young seconds. Roll call.
Mr. Renier?
Yes.
Mrs. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Psalm?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
And 9:19.
There will be no action afterwards.
You want to stay here?
Thank you for sticking around.
Just stay here. Can you shut that thing off? Oh,